The automatic doors of Mercy General Hospital slid open and shut with a mechanical sigh, spilling rectangles of fluorescent light onto the rain-slicked pavement. Just beyond the glow, a small golden puppy sat perfectly still, his damp fur ruffled by the chilly October wind. His watchful eyes, two pools of liquid warmth in the cold night, never strayed from the entrance. Dr. Evan Carter had seen him before. Over the past week, during his late shifts in the ER, he'd noticed the little dog lingering near the ambulance bay. At first, he assumed the pup was just a stray, drawn by the scent of food or the warmth of the building. But there was something different about this one. He wasn't scavenging. He wasn't begging. He was waiting. Most of the hospital staff hurried inside, heads ducked against the weather, barely glancing at the soggy creature huddled near the bike rack. But Evan paused. The puppy, no bigger than a loaf of bread, was shivering violently, his fur plastered to his thin frame. Yet despite the storm, he refused to leave his post. Evan crouched, ignoring the water soaking through the knees of his scrubs. "Hey there," he said softly. The puppy lifted his head. His ears twitched forward, and for a brief, hopeful second, his tail gave a hesitant wag, as if Evan might be the person he'd been waiting for. Then, recognizing a stranger, he slumped back down, resting his chin on his paws. Evan's throat tightened. He reached out, letting the pup sniff his fingers. A pink tongue darted out, licking his knuckles once before retreating.
"You're freezing," Evan murmured.
He shrugged off his coat, bundling the trembling dog inside. The puppy didn't resist, too exhausted to do anything but curl into the warmth. Just then, Nurse Lisa pushed through the doors, balancing an armful of supplies. She paused, her sharp eyes flicking from Evan to the lump in his coat. "Oh," she said quietly.
"You found Benny." "Benny."
Evan adjusted his grip, feeling the pup's heartbeat against his palm. Lisa's expression softened. "Yeah." He belonged to Mr. Thompson, sweet old guy, came in for chemo every Thursday. Always had this little guy with him, right up until... She trailed off, but Evan understood.
"Until the end."
Evan looked down at Benny. The pup's nose was pressed against the coat's zipper, his eyes fixed on the hospital doors.
"Still waiting."
Still hoping.
A lamp rose in Evanes trot.
Somewhere inside, a code blue alarm blared, and Lisa tensed. "Gotta run," she said, already backing toward the ER. But she hesitated, glancing at Benny. Security's been trying to chase him off. Animal controls called a couple times. He won't last much longer out here. The doors hissed shut behind her, leaving Evan alone in the rain with a dog who didn't yet know his heart had broken. Benny whimpered, squirming in Evan's arms until he could see the entrance again. And Evan made a decision. He couldn't leave him. Not tonight. Tucking the pup closer, he turned toward the parking lot, and the first step of an unexpected journey. The fluorescent lights of Mercy General's ER hummed like tired insects as Dr. Evan Carter rubbed his eyes, the glow of his computer screen blurring the lines of patient charts before him. It was 3:17 a.m., the witching hour of hospitals, when grief and exhaustion hung heaviest in the air. But tonight, Evan's attention wasn't on the screen. Through the rain-streaked window of the doctor's lounge, he could see Benny. The golden puppy sat exactly where he had the night before, his small body a patch of warmth against the concrete. Every time the automatic doors slid open, Benny's ears pricked forward, his nose twitching as he scanned the faces of the entering staff. When a deep laugh echoed from the ambulance bay, Benny's entire body stiffened, his tail thumping once, hopefully, before stilling again. "He thinks it's him." Evan's chest ached. He'd spent the last 24 hours turning over Nurse Lisa's words in his mind.
"Mr. Thompson's dog. Come to every chemo session."
Didn't make it last week. He'd even pulled up the old man's file, though he knew it was a breach of protocol.
"James Thompson, 72.
Pancreatic cancer. No listed next of kin. Just a note in the nursing logs. Patient requests permission to bring small dog to appointments. Dog is well behaved, provides comfort. And now that dog was outside in the cold, waiting for a man who would never walk through those doors again. A sharp knock startled him.
"You're zoning out, Carter." Dottore Ruiz leaned against the doorframe, sipping bitter hospital coffee. "Third time I've called you." Evan blinked.
"Sorry. Just distracted." Ruiz followed his gaze out the window.
Ah. The Thompson dog.
He sighed. Security's got orders to call animal control tomorrow if he's still here. Hospital board says it's a liability. Evan's fingers tightened around his pen. He's not a stray. He's grieving. And what's your medical opinion on that, doctor? Ruiz raised an eyebrow, but there was no malice in it, just weary resignation.
Look, I get it.
But we can't save everyone. Or every dog. The words settled like stones in Evan's gut. By dawn, his shift was over, but Evan lingered near the entrance, watching Benny. The pup had begun to pace, his nails clicking against the pavement as he sniffed at shoes, his nose working overtime to find a scent he'd never catch again. A young intern tossed him a piece of muffin. Benny ignored it. He's not hungry. He's heartbroken. Evan crouched, holding out his hand. Benny trotted over, but his eyes kept darting back to the doors.
Hey, buddy, Evan murmured.
The pup's fur was damp with dew, his ribs too pronounced beneath Evan's fingers. How many nights had he spent out here? How many more would he wait, wasting away for a ghost? Benny whined, straining toward the entrance as an elderly man in a flannel shirt shuffled inside. For a second, his whole body quivered with hope, then slumped. Not him. Never him again.
Something inside Evan cracked.
Before he could second-guess himself, he scooped Benny into his arms. The pup yelped in surprise, twisting to look back at the hospital, his paws braced against Evan's chest as if to leap back down. I know, Evan whispered into his fur.
I know you're waiting.
But he's not coming back, Benny. The pup stilled. Then, as if the words had finally sunk in, a shudder ran through him, and he buried his face against Evan's scrubs. Whether in resignation or acceptance, Evan couldn't tell, but Benny didn't fight as he carried him to the parking lot. The first rays of sunlight painted the sky pink as Evan buckled the trembling dog into his passenger seat. Benny stared at the hospital through the window, his nose leaving foggy smudges on the glass. Evan turned the ignition.
Let's go home.
The first night in Evan's apartment was the longest. Benny paced the hardwood floors like a restless spirit, his nails clicking in the silence between the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional groan of the building's pipes. He sniffed every corner, every piece of furniture, as if searching for something, or someone, familiar. When he reached the front door, he sat down hard, ears pricked forward, staring at it with such intensity that Evan half expected the wood to splinter under the weight of his hope. Evan crouched beside him. He's not coming through that door, buddy, he said softly. Benny didn't look at him. His tail didn't wag. Evan exhaled, running a hand through his hair. What did you expect? That he'd just forget? The first week was a dance of patience and heartbreak. Evan bought a plush dog bed and placed it near the fireplace, where the warmth might mimic the heat of a lap Benny no longer had. Benny ignored it, opting instead to curl up on a discarded sweater of Evan's, the one that smelled most like the hospital. He refused to eat from a bowl. Evan had to scatter kibble on the floor, pretending it was an accident, just to get him to nibble at something. The worst were the nights. Evan would wake to the sound of whining, soft and broken, and find Benny sitting by the apartment door, his nose pressed to the crack beneath it, as if he could will it to open. One particularly bad evening, Evan gave in. He leashed Benny up and drove him back to Mercy General, just to see if it would ease whatever restless grief was eating the dog alive. Big mistake. Benny nearly wrenched the leash from Evan's hands in his excitement, bolting for the entrance with a joy that made Evan's stomach twist. But when no familiar voice called out to him, when no wrinkled hands reached down to scratch behind his ears, Benny's entire body seemed to deflate. He sat down in the middle of the lobby, head drooping, and let out a single quiet whimper that shattered Evan's heart all over again. A nurse from oncology, one who'd known Mr. Thompson, stopped in her tracks. "Oh, Benny," she murmured, crouching to stroke his head. Then, to Evan, he used to sit under Mr. Thompson's chair during treatments. Never made a peep, just leaned against his legs the whole time. Evan swallowed hard. That night, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, Benny a tense little ball at the foot of the bed. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe he'll never. A warm weight settled against his side. Benny, curling into the space between Evan's arm and his ribs, his breath evening out into sleep. Evan didn't dare move.
The turning point came in small moments.
The first time Benny ate from his bowl without prompting. The first time he brought Evan a toy, a ragged stuffed squirrel, and dropped it at his feet with a tentative wag. The first time he fell asleep in his own bed, instead of by the door. And then, one rainy afternoon, the biggest milestone of all. Evan was sprawled on the couch, half asleep after a double shift, when Benny clambered up beside him.
Not to stare at the door.
Not to whine, but to shove his head under Evan's hand, demanding pets, his tail thumping against the cushions. Evan obliged, scratching behind Benny's ears the way he'd learned the dog liked. Benny sighed, melting into the touch, his eyes slipping shut. It wasn't a grand gesture. There was no dramatic music swelling in the background. But in that quiet, ordinary moment, something monumental shifted.
Benny wasn't waiting anymore.
3 months later, Mercy General's board approved Benny as the hospital's first official therapy dog. Evan brought him in on a Tuesday, his vest embroidered with "Staff" in cheerful blue letters. The effect was instantaneous. Nurses cooed over him. Stressed interns snuck him treats when they thought Evan wasn't looking. And the patients, especially the ones in oncology, lit up when Benny trotted to their bedsides, his tail a metronome of happiness. "He's a natural," Lisa remarked, watching Benny gently rest his head on an elderly woman's knee. Evan smiled. "Yeah, he is." That evening, as they walked through the hospital doors to head home, Benny didn't look back. He kept pace with Evan, his leash loose, his gait easy. The past wasn't forgotten. Some nights, Benny still dreamed, his paws twitching as he chased something, or someone, in his sleep. And Evan would reach down, smoothing a hand over his fur until the dog settled. But the present was enough.
The future was bright.
And as they stepped into the autumn sunlight together, Evan knew, neither of them would ever be alone again.